Mr. Speaker, despite the many positions of the Government of Canada, this motion is not about a ceasefire. This motion is about rewarding Hamas for their massacre. This motion is a vote to reward the murder, the rape, the kidnapping of Israelis, and this motion is deeply irresponsible for this Parliament. And it's hard to explain and express the complex feelings of shock and fear and anger felt by thousands across the country who are being subjected to this motion today. It would have been enough if they were shocked by the public displays of blatant anti-Semitism in our streets, driven entirely by the irresponsible rhetoric in this House. It would have been enough if they were fearful for what lies ahead in Canada. It would have been enough if they were only angry and betrayed by this government's duplicitous attempt to be all things to all people, like we just heard. But today, the blind sellout to the forces of evil at home and abroad is what should be a wake-up call like no other to every freedom-loving Canadian who has built any piece of this country and who enjoys everything that those before us had built for us. This would be a ceasefire motion if it called for Hamas to lay down its arms, to surrender, and for immediately to return every single hostage, bring them home. It is not that. In the face of some of the world's most vile anti-Semitism and in the wake of the deadliest day for the Jews since the Holocaust, this government and this Prime Minister, held captive by its NDP overlords, are giving in to terror. And this motion is only the latest example of that. Since October 7th, as Hamas launched an unprovoked and unjustified attack on innocent civilians in Israel, where hundreds of men and women, young and old, were raped, murdered, tortured, and taken hostage, more than 100 of those hostages still being held captive. This motion is not only an abandonment of the ongoing fight to bring those hostages home, it is an abandonment of our ally in Israel, and more than that, it is a blind giveaway to Hamas terrorists and those who seek to undermine democracy, freedom, the rule of law in the Middle East and in the Western world. It is an insult to everyone who lost a family member in the attack, to anyone who witnesses a nation, an ally, paralyzed by the forces so barbaric, so evil, that discussing this motion today flies in the face of civilization and the future of a Palestinian people free of Hamas. There is a reason, Mr. Speaker, that Canada has a long-standing policy of not negotiating with terrorists. It's because it rewards barbarism, and worse, it provides an incentive for that barbarism to continue and even escalate. I want members of this chamber to think long and hard about what many concessions in this motion mean for peace. In the short term, they mean that Hamas will remain intact. They mean that no more members of Hamas will be brought to justice. They mean that no more hostages will likely be brought home. In the long run, they mean that Hamas will be rewarded for their decision to attack a democratic nation. It means that our lost decade of foreign policy in this country will be culminated by a recognition of a state ruled by terror, instead of what was a long-established consensus of Canadian foreign policy by Liberal governments before this one, that states that it should be a negotiated solution among parties. And the Government of Canada supports parties who want to see a future of two states living side by side in peace and security in a negotiated settlement. It is shocking and it is shameful that elected representatives here in this place would support such a dead giveaway to a group literally defined as terrorists by Canadian law. Imagine a future for the Palestinian people free of Hamas. We don't have to imagine it. We see it in the success of peaceful Gulf states whose raison d'etre is not the annihilation of the other or a perverse nihilism of their own people. But we shouldn't be surprised, however, after 8 years of this Prime Minister and his Liberal government, our nation has abandoned almost every principle that we used to be known for on the world stage. It is this government that called the Taliban our brothers and sisters, that frolicked with African dictators to try and buy a seat on the UN Security Council, that fails the basic task of listing the IRGC as the terrorists and banning them from this country, who are known backers of these atrocities and who intimidate our own citizens as sport, and now taking the side of a literal terrorist organization best known for killing babies in ovens and starving their own citizens in Gaza for more than a generation. Yes, peace is needed in the Middle East. And yes, we all want to see an end to violence, and we all want to see aid reach those who are absolutely in need of it. And yes, we want to find a long-term solution that helps both innocent Israelis and innocent Palestinians live in peace and security. And yes, Hamas is responsible for all of the carnage that sets these goals back. But there is a way to do it without sacrificing our principles, I should say, and there's a way to do it that is not a dead giveaway to a murderous, barbaric, inhumane terrorist group. This motion is not that way. It advances the same kind of foreign policy that sees our foreign minister and the member of parliament from York Centre caressing the hand of a dictator in the 19th year of his 4-year term, a terrorist who denies the Holocaust, who denies October 7th, and who set up the Martyrs Fund that rewards families of terrorists who killed Jews, including, in some cases, family members in that member's riding. There is no other words than shameful for that, and today she will have a free vote on this motion, and we will all be watching. And if she puts her community first, we'll see if she puts her community first or if she's just a sellout to the Prime Minister and the radical mob once again. As this is not about foreign policy, but the heartless ploy to placate the domestic audience by a government that has lost its way. I'm not afraid for my community to see the tragic support of a deeply illiberal government stand against them, but I am afraid for our country and for our reputation abroad, and most of all for the values that this country is formed upon, the values of order, of democracy, of justice, of freedom, and the precedent that is being set here today with this motion. The casual and gradual erosion and disregard of the very beliefs that make this country special, sending a signal that we support a noisy few over a silent many, lawlessness over principle, what's convenient instead of what's right. They're playing a dangerous game of moral equivalency, pitting one group against another. They misrepresent the truth about support for funding for organizations like UNRWA, in fact, for the organization UNRWA. They promised a month ago, this government promised a month ago that they would cut off the flow of taxpayer dollars to an agency whose members actively participated in October 7th. Rewarding rapists is what they are doing. It's yet another empty and broken pledge made in a blatantly transactional manner for domestic politics, one that never saw the funding stop. They advanced payments instead, and they upped the amount. These payments are not going to bankrupt our country, not in a fiscal sense, but in a moral sense. The price of abandoning our values, our allies, and reason. That is the true cost of these payments. That is the true cost of this Prime Minister's moral indifference. And that is the true cost of this motion. It is not too late, Mr. Speaker. We can begin by voting this down. We can begin by voting down this Hamas giveaway. We can continue by voting out this immoral, immature, liberal government. And we can finish by instilling in place a principled, common-sense, conservative government that will never support this motion. Not now and not ever. Hamas is watching this House. Our allies are watching this House. Canadians are watching this House. And to our allies and to all Canadians, you will see that there are members on this side that stand in your fight for democracy, that stand in your fight for the West, and that stand in your fight for justice. I will leave you with these words. There are going to be many politicians that make a choice today. Ours will be the right one, and I can only hope that all members on the other side, make the right one too. And when they don't, those who sit with them will have to account for their own choices, Mr. Speaker.